Welcome to the Shoegazing podcast. I'm Jesper Ingevaldsson, who run the classic shoe blog shoegazing.com. In today's episode, we're meeting Jonathan Church, one of the owners of the British firm Cheaney Sons. Jonathan has worked in the footwear industry for 3 decades, first in the firm bearing his family name, Churches, and later with Cheaney. Cheaney was one of the last Northampton-based shoe factories to transcend from focusing on private label to sell shoes under their own name, which they did after Jonathan and his cousin William Church acquired the company in 2009. It has resulted in a massive increase in both turnover and profits. Our talk focuses around this topic, but we also talk about his experience of the Prada takeover of Churches and about Brexit. All right, Jonathan Church of Cheaney Shoes, one of the 2 owners. Welcome to the Shoegazing podcast.
Thank you, Jasper. Welcome to you as well here at Micam.
Yeah, we're sitting in the fair here, so maybe you will hear some background talking and stuff like that, but I hope the sound will be good enough. So, as a sort of background here first, when did you start working in the shoe industry and in the Churches company?
I joined Churches in 1989 when I was 27. I think that's right. Got my math going bad. And I've been in the shoe industry ever since. So I'm now in my 30 years plus.
You know your way around now?
I know my way around a fairly small part of it because really what my knowledge is English could you well to.
And how did you experience the Prada purchase of Churches? Have to ask that.
It was a very interesting time really because Churches was a publicly floated company on the stock market. And at that time, it was 1999, when anyone who was making profit, generating cash, their shares were not wanted. Everybody was buying tech. Anybody with any internet connection, shares were flying, but traditional businesses weren't. We were in a position where we had 2 Italian companies who wanted to buy Church, one being Tod's and the other being Prada, who really got into a bidding war of each other. And in the end, Prada successfully bought it.
And when they took over, how did you experience it?
They finally bought it at the end of 1999. And they were very good actually. They came in, I think one of our concerns being a public company with stock that was quite diluted was that Church could have ended up being bought by an asset stripping company or someone who didn't really understand the significance of the Made in England mark. Prada really did understand that. They knew what Church was. And there's proof of that. You can see the investments they've made in the factories in St. James. They've been, I would say, pretty good owners. Being on the inside is always never quite as probably glamorous as looking from the outside. And it had its interesting moments, but I spent 10 years with them. And overall, as I repeat myself, I'd say they were good owners.
Yeah, because after 10 years at Churches with Prada as owners, you and your cousin William Church, who you own Cheaney with, you bought Cheaney from Churches in 2009. Many might not know, but Churches had owned Cheaneys from the 60s or something like that. So why did you want to take this step?
It was... I've got to stop saying to every question. I guess you get used to that as you do. Churches, as you say, owned Cheaney and had owned Cheaney since the 60s. Prada, ironically, Miuccia Prada's husband, Patricio Batelli, the chief executive, had started work with Cheaney before Church. He had a brand called Granello, so he knew it. I think it was quite close to his heart. But Prada were going public in Hong Kong, and beforehand they were selling off non-core brands, which I believe was Jules Sander and various others, and one of which was Cheaney. I was financial director of Churches at the time, and it's one of those opportunities that you look at and think this could be a really interesting business. It's got everything you need. It's got factories, most importantly, skilled labour force, a brand that was probably less known in the consumer market, but very well known in the industry, because most of what he'd been doing was private label work. So it's one of those moments where you stick your head above the parapet, decide to make the move, knowing that if it goes wrong, it's very difficult to go back. So particularly in the role I was in. So we did put an offer into Prada. And actually it worked for both sides, because from their point of view, we could do a very good deal because we could do it quickly without too much due diligence, and didn't get into prolonged negotiations and merchant bankers. And from our point of view, similarly, we could do it quickly and get out. And we knew what we were buying. We knew there were no bad skeletons under the floorboards, as we say. So it was a good opportunity to do, and it was actually turned out to be very good timing, because 2009 was probably the turning point for the luxury goods market, where it started after the financial crash of 2008. The market started to rebound. So it turned out to be a good period, but that was more luck than foresight.
And as you mentioned, back then Cheaney was mainly producing private label shoes, and contrary to the at the time more successful Northampton factories, who had already switched over to making more shoes under their own brand. And you had a set plan to go that route as well with Cheaney. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, the strategy, if I look back, the strategy in that period in 2009 was to get the Cheaney brand into the marketplace. So we envisaged doing that by opening retail. Now, we obviously didn't have unlimited wealth to do that, so it was going to be more organic growth. And we set our line down to do one store a year, which actually we've done. It's not always been one a year. Sometimes it's been two a year, then nothing the next year. But we have 11 stores and we're in our 11th year. We then also wanted to expand the export market, so we decided to go to trade shows, Pitti, and this one, Micam, which we've been doing for 10 years, appointing agents, and really marketing the Cheaney brand rather than too much private label MTO. And we also, which I now look back, the only thing I didn't really foresee was we said we ought to do an e-commerce site, but with the nature of footwear, it's going to be very difficult to get many sales because of the fitting issues. That was completely wrong. Though e-commerce has been huge for everybody. Despite the issue of fitting shoes, people do seem to know their sizes, and it's a very successful venture. And of course, it expands the brand out there, gives a lot of brand awareness.
And as you also mentioned, with the timing, it was very good. You hit sort of the renaissance of welted classic footwear. What did that mean for you?
Well, what it meant really was that suddenly English welted was very in vogue around the world. So we had a lot of people coming to us to do work, either be private. Again, as I said, we tried not to do private label, but we do some. A lot more joint label work. So we did some joint label with some very interesting brands, including, at the moment we're doing Vivienne Westwood, but in the past we have done Hackett, we worked with Barber. There's one I was just trying to think of, So the joint label work has been one that we have really enjoyed, because it takes our brand name into other markets. So Superdry was one we did. That's a really interesting one, because Superdry we all associate with probably streetwear, and suddenly people like Superdry were getting into a little element of British welted. So that was a new audience for us.
And it's surely been a success, because more than 200% earnings increase 2018 compared to 2009 when you took over. So how would you describe the Cheaney business today?
Today it's a much stronger business than it was. Again, if you go back to when we bought it, it was a fairly fragile business because of its dependency on private label. And private label can be very fickle because, of course, it can move and the consumer doesn't always know. And today it's much more robust. We have 60% of our turnover going through our own distribution channels, be it e-commerce, be it retail. And then wholesale makes up the rest. So I'd say we're a fairly strong position now financially. And there's no secret the markets for high-quality footwear at the moment is quite difficult. And we're in a robust position to go through that condition, whereas 10 years ago, would have been very hard.
Yeah, how do you experience it today? Like you say, it's a fierce competition, and we sort of passed by the peak when it comes to the interest for welted shoes, at least in many markets.
Well, I think at the moment the fashion is definitely onto trainers. You can see it. If you go into the classic department stores, you will see 90% trainers there. And that reflects what's going on in the market. But that changes. It'll always change, and I've seen it before. And in the end, people always do return back to quality. It's a cyclical thing. And as I said to you, Cheaney's in a strong position to wear through that. But it is certainly at the moment a little bit choppier than it's been. And our retail helps us. Having our own retail stores out there continues to promote the brand in this period.
And how many are they all in the UK, or do you also have international Cheaney shops?
No, at the moment they're all in the UK, and mostly in London, and a couple outside. We have one in Leeds and one in Cambridge. That would be probably the obvious next stage, would be to start looking overseas. But as of today, we have no concrete plans.
But as you mentioned, the e-commerce business seems to be quite important for you. You are one of the British brands who actually have a really large web shop with basically all your ranges, and also shipping internationally. How important is that for you?
It's very important, very, very important, because it takes our brand straight out to the end consumer. So we can actually, if you think in the past you had to put your shoes in a department store, they may have carried 10 models in a department store with 1,000 models of mostly other people's. In the e-commerce, we have only our own product. We can show our story, our heritage, our factory, everything we want to do. So it really has given strength to suppliers, that ability to go straight to the end consumer.
And can you say something about the turnover today compared to when you took over? How much has it changed?
Yeah, our turnover, our year ends today, but our turnover is around £11 million. And when we took it over, we were just below 4 million.
And it's the change from doing private label to marketing your own brand and producing Cheaney shoes for the markets, that's been the hit.
Yeah, it's producing Cheaney shoes, but it's also, if you're selling e-commerce or selling retail, you're getting a retail price point to, as opposed to a wholesale price point. But, wholesale is equally important to us, but we don't want to be 100% dependent on wholesale. So to have it as 40% of turnover is a good position to be in, and we would like to continue to grow that and maintain and grow.
We talked a bit about it, but when you look at the competition today, one side we had the interest, but also we have the increased competition within welted shoes, with loads of new brands and players, many produced in various other European countries, but we also have increasing extent of shoes coming from China and Vietnam and so on, and Japan, who have a good market for classic shoes. They now have the free trade agreement with the EU. What's your view on this?
The Japanese one's interesting because the Japanese are very high quality and but tend to be very small on the whole. You have the Spanish brands who have a lower cost of labour, but made in England is very important in many markets because of its heritage. And so in terms of English competition, there aren't new brands. Well, there are. Foster's have just opened a factory, but there aren't many volume coming into it. The same brands. We all know each other. We all have our own particular sort of areas of expertise, and that's fairly solid. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the future regards that. And I know the Spanish have done pretty well opening up outside UK, but you don't see them in the UK, for example.
Can you say something about how much of your sales that are domestic and how much that are international? Something there?
We're far more UK. So one of our strategic aims is to get the exports growing. I wear this show today more than it is. We have our biggest market. I just said Japan is number 1 on the export and Italy's number 2. When I'm talking to people who aren't in the footwear business, they're always astounded that Italy is such a big market for English welted, because coals to Newcastle, we have an expression, Newcastle made coal, and yet why would you send coal to Newcastle? In the same way, everyone associates Italy with being shoemakers, but they don't make English welted.
And of course, we have to mention Brexit. For a company like Cheaney, who supply a lot of material from the EU and who sell a lot internationally, how are you dealing with Brexit?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, Jesper, today, because today I think, and probably my colleagues in the other industry, in other companies will say the same, we're all quite calm about it. If you'd asked us 6 months ago, we would have taken over this microphone and talked to you for an hour about the frustration with government. But since the election, regardless of politics, which political side you're on, I think everybody's in favour of having a government with a majority. It means they can get whatever they need to do through the parliament, which we couldn't do before. Regarding shoemaking, yes, we import our raw material. I'm a Remainer. I wanted to remain in Europe, but I also accept we have to change because our country's changed. So if you go forward, at the moment we're in limbo. The pound is quite high, so our leather prices are going down. I think the pound's at a 3-year high against the euro as we speak. What will happen next? I don't know. We haven't got to worry now until January. I sincerely hope we have a decent deal done with Europe, but that's out of my control. I can, of course, have a voice, but I'm not sitting in the cabinet or sitting in the negotiations. My fear is maybe the auto industry or fish industry will get some deal, and some of the other smaller industries like shoemaking will be kind of sacrificed. I hope that doesn't happen, and if it starts to appear that, we will raise our voice through our various channels that we have to do that through. The doomsday scenario would be where you have a tariff import duty on leather coming into UK from Europe, and then you have a tariff on goods going out, and then we lose the free trade that Europe's negotiated with America and with Japan and Korea. But I hope that won't happen. I hope that countries around the world will also see the UK as a strong trading partner and will do deals. But I have no control on that.
So going forward, what will Cheaney do to continue to thrive?
I think our strategy we've got is still a good one, and still got further to grow. Exports have certainly got further to grow. There's many markets we're not so actively involved in that we would like to be, probably appointing agents. The possibility of a retail store overseas, I mean, of course, that takes investment, but you do get a return if you're prepared to be patient and do it. And being a private company, we can do that. We don't have to have profits growth every year. It's nice, but it's not essential.
All right. Jonathan Church of Cheaney, thank you very much for being part of the Shoegazing podcast.
Thank you very much, Jesper, for your time, and thanks for coming to Micam and seeing us all here.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening in on this episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give it a good rating or comment in your podcast player. The Shoegazing podcast will be back with a new episode in a short while, so hear you again soon.